experience, strength and hope, for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he or she is finished. So, and he found out he was speaking about 20 minutes ago, so. So he had absolutely zero time to think about this. So it is my pleasure to introduce Lee.
Hi everybody, my name is Lee and I am an alcoholic and I hope you can hear me. That's important. Last February 29th, which was Leap Year Day, I stood up in front of this group, but it was over at the VA, and spoke. And I had my big book with me and my notes and everything, make sure I hit upon these points and everything like that. And the following Monday, they shut down the VA. Said, we don't want this guy back here anymore. So that's what you're in for today. I had a kind of a funny feeling about John. He comes over and he looks at me and he says, and he never sits down next to me. He'll hug me, but he won't sit down next to me. And I said, uh-oh, something's up. And he says, the speaker isn't showing up tonight. Do you suppose you could be my backup speaker? I said, it's supposed to be a woman. I know, but I don't have one available. And then about 2 sentences later, he says, you got some time, haven't you? Which I told him what it was, and he goes, anyway, I'm here for a lot of reasons, but mainly because I'm not all there. And I want to carry this message that I'm not all there to people in this room, but especially to the newcomers. I have always felt that, first of all, my sobriety date is on April 15th. It might have been the 14th, it might have been the 16th, but the April 15th was easier for me to remember, and it was in 1989. Whew, that's a long time ago. Anyway, John was relieved to hear that I had more than 48 hours of sobriety. So I'm going to start out by, I wanted to just read something here, just to get me started. This is something in the big book, and it's the 2 sentences before the promises. And if you've read the promises, it's most of us in here, and some of you newcomers, you're gradually getting them. You gradually get them. But what this says here, and this became my mantra for the last 30-some years, we should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble, without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. And I saw that when I started to get my eyesight back, and I looked at it and I said, Jesus, that's me. That's me. And so I wrote those 2 down, and I put them on 3x5 cards. I put them on stickers, on smiley faces. I put them everywhere. I had to read this. Now, I want you to understand that this is in reference to going out and making amends. But when I read those 2 sentences, I thought, my God, what a way to live. Because when I came into AA, when I walked through those doors for the first time, I really, really, really was beaten up. And I hated myself. I hated you. I hated, I'll get to that in my stories, but I hated my second wife a lot. And you'll understand in a minute. Yeah, I rode that resentment for almost 10 years. And I didn't get sober in 10 years either. So, just what it was like, when I also want to relay one other thing I think is important for us. We hear in AA a lot that we inherited this gene from our family. Okay, that sounds reasonable, doesn't it? My grandfather, my father, my mother, my oldest sister Janice, the one after her, maybe, me, my brother Jim, my sister Kathy, my brother Brian, my brother Del. There were 7 of us in the family. And their kids were all alcoholics. So you might say I inherited it, but I don't believe that, see. I believe I had that. But what I believe is it was my surroundings. By watching everybody in my family drink, I thought for sure that's what you had to do. And I did all those things like sneak drinks and everything like that. When my dad's having a party or he's passed out, run in there and grab the bottle, all that crap. And I was 12 years old before I found out that my first name wasn't, "Hey kid, get me a beer." So and I was the oldest son of a family of 7 children. So, a lot of pressure. And my father was a functioning alcoholic. The functioning alcoholic is one whose wife works. Think about that for a minute. Okay. Anyway, so I grew up in that, and I got some. I had a Catholic. I'm a recovering Catholic too. I got that education, and there's my mother calling me, son of a bitch. So, anyway, so I got all the teaching, 10 Commandments, blah blah this, blah blah that, and those are good. Those are really good because, kind of as a child, it gives us a way. Excuse me. Look forward to forming our life. Like. I think it's a good idea not to kill somebody, unless you're in trouble, and then whatever happens, happens. But, so I grew up that way, and I grew up, my father telling me all the things he wanted me to be. I was supposed to be a corporate attorney. That's probably because he paid them so much money, and he never really was a good businessman. And then he wanted me to be a metallurgist. This may surprise you, but I'm a dumb trucker. That's you'll hear it. Anyway, moving along. I always had this attitude that I did not want to be like my father. My father, one Christmas we would have presents stacked up to the ceiling on a huge Christmas tree. The following Christmas we'd be eating hot dogs, and my mother's Christmas present for me was a homemade coffee table that I made her. That's the way and you've seen people do this, ups and downs, and then after a while, after you get sober, they become like this. But that's the way it was every year, and my oldest sister, she got to go to one of the Ivy League colleges, and on her wedding day, my father informed me I had been accepted at 3 colleges after I got out of high school, and he informed me there was no money there for me to go to college, and I'm the type of person that doesn't take no for an answer, especially if you got to put a drink in front of me. But I got a job. This is hard to believe. I did it. 18 years old, the guy says, the owner of this transportation company, it was an oil distribution company. Back east, we used heating oil to heat our houses, not gas, big business. He says to me, "You know how to shift a truck?" I said, "Yeah." "Okay, I'm going to put you out on a delivery truck." We used to go to houses and drop oil in the houses, and he did that for 6 months, and then he walked up to me and says, "From now on, you're going to be moving product you're going to go to Boston and Hartford, and you're going to pick up 8,000 gallons of gasoline, and you're going to drive it back here." That molded my life. It molded my life, my career, because I did that. During that period of time, I guess you call it a gap year. Yeah. And I earned enough money to get into, and with some help from him, his name was Bill Sandry, and he was well known, and with his help, he got me into a place called Worcester Academy, because he said, you were chasing girls too much during high school, you need to do math. So, so I got in, I got tutored, I got into Worcester Academy, I got a football scholarship, and I got a work scholarship. Now, why I'm telling you this is because for you people in here who are new or almost new, I have this deep-seated feeling that when it comes to this program, Alcoholics Anonymous, and you living a good life, you need to be persistent and determined. And that's what I was. So the long and the short of it was, I got out of Worcester Academy. I went to what you call a work-study college, Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. And I used to hitchhike there. I could get down there from Greenfield, Massachusetts to Boston as fast as you could drive. I had my tie, my sport coat, Samsonite bag with a sign on it that says Boston. The other side said Greenfield, And Greenfield's about 100 miles from Boston, just to give you an idea. So that's what I did. I took their first. You had to go the freshman year full time, and then after that you went out and you went to school for 10 weeks and you worked for 10 weeks. Then that was called the work study. So I got my first work study job at a foundry, and it paid me $50 a week. And you got to do the math here, I'm old. That was a lot of money then, but not so much. It wasn't enough to put me through college. So I went back to my coordinator, counselor, whatever you want to call it, and says, I can't make it. I can't make it that's $500 in 10 weeks. How am I going to pay my tuition? He says, well, you got any better ideas? I said, yes, I do. Back to Sandry Oil, and I started driving those tankers, and I drove them all through college. And I made a lot of mistakes. I'm one of these people that when things are going sideways, I might react by dumping 1,000 gallons of fuel in the wrong tank at somebody's house, or just my mentor, Bill Sandry, he called me in the office one day after I had made 2 of those, dropping 1,000 gallons into the wrong tanks and then having to go back and pump them out. So he says, "What's going on with you?" And I told him, I said, I'm trying to save my money to get through college, but my old man is having me make payments on this house, a huge house. It had to be in. Oh yeah, my father was one of these, bet 'em high and live in the streets. And that's okay in poker, but in life it's not okay. So he had to have this big house up on a hill, in one of the finer sections of Greenfield. Problem was, he couldn't make the mortgage payments, and he would use this guilt trip on me. Like, he'd be out there polishing his fancy boat, a water ski boat, and I'll never forget this, and he says to me, "Son, I need some help with the mortgage this month." And I said, "I haven't got it." Well, what Sandry had done is he and I agreed that I was going to get $20 worth of spending money for the week, which was plenty back in those days, and the rest of my money was going to be in a different check. It was going to be in their safe at the office, so that when my 10 weeks were up, I would have enough cash to pay my tuition. And I just remember this one time, because this is part of what formed me, and this is part of my personality. And he'd say to me, "So you're telling me you want your mother and sisters to be out on the street, right?" That's good old Catholic guilt. That's good old Catholic guilt. And you know what happened, right? I go down to Sandry and I got to have the money, and he just shook his head. But he kept helping me with that plan. See, the other part of this inheriting this disease, I also think I had this other trait that brought me into full-blown alcoholism, and that was I was a doormat. I inherited that from my mother. And, 7 kids, no money. You got to be a doormat to put up a crap like that. So anyway, I got through college. And I tried a couple of years at drinking moderately, and I got my real estate broker's license there and took on a life insurance program. So I was doing okay. The problem was every time a truck would go by and I was going out to lunch or something, my head would turn. And my district manager at the insurance company came up to me one day and he says, "You know something, Lee?" He says, "You really don't want, you're doing good. I'm making a lot of money off you, but you don't want to be in this business, do you?" And that was the truth. I needed somebody else to tell me that. I couldn't figure it out for myself. So we're going to move on and get out of the trucking business, but that is a big part of my story. So I did like every young man that age would do. I rescued this girl out of a household that father was a drunk and a bartender. What a great combination. If you're going to be a drunk, you really want to be a bartender too. Knockies, they used to say knockies were good tonight. That's what it used to be. Knockies, that means all the free booze you wanted, right? So I rescued her from that, and had some, metaphorical suspenders on, beautiful girl, really nice, not too bright, but okay. But I did want to be in the trucking business. So all of a sudden I came up with this idea. Why don't I start my own business? So I found a backer in Boston, and I went out and I took this guy. This is really crazy. I took this guy on as a partner who never drove a truck. So during that period of time, he said, I'll handle the finance or whatever, And so I'm out driving this truck cross country over. I used to haul swinging beef from Omaha, Nebraska, back to the East Coast, and then haul frozen fish out. It was a pretty good gig. Ended up having 4 trucks. Point I'm bringing out here is that he was back home taking care of business all right, and I came back between Christmas and New Year's, and my wife was gone. So was my partner. Hello. Now, here's a telltale sign. I only got drunk for a month over that, but I didn't think I had a problem. Any guy would drink if somebody stole his wife. Of course, I would never be able to look back and see what my part of that might have been. No, not when you're 26 years old and you're pissed off and now you've got a grudge. Now you've got a resentment, and a big one. But I managed to get through that with only 2 months of being drunk and not getting picked up by the police. And I used to be very patriotic, too. I loved red, white, and blue, unless they're flashing behind you. That makes a big difference. So onto it, I came out of that breakup, and I decided that if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, never make a beautiful woman your wife. So I latched onto this woman who was not drop-dead gorgeous, but she was classy. She was really classy. She was so classy that the doctor told her, after she had our second child, that she couldn't have any more kids. Back in those days, she had I don't know what it was, but anyway, she had that. So I'm backwards. So my second wife, she's working in this hospital, and the doctor said she shouldn't have any more kids, so I did the noble thing, right? I did it. And lo and behold, this is the second wife now, lo and behold, well, before I should give you the lo and behold, I'm going to say, had a great job with a trucking company called McLean Trucking, and I was rising up through the ranks, had the house, the metaphorical white picket fence around it, 2 children. That's the, you know, what do they call it? Rich man's family, a girl and a boy. And she up and got pregnant 2.5 years after I had that vasectomy. And did she come home to tell me about it? No. She's 50 miles away in Green. We were living up near Pittsfield, Massachusetts then. And she calls me up on the phone. Only child of an only child of an only child. There's something wrong there. She calls me up to tell me that the doctor told her that she's pregnant. And I remember that so well. It was like a Monday night. And she told me that, and I was like speechless, you know, and I said, well, who's the father? Oh, Dr. Wadman wants you to go back and have more tests. I said, no. See, well, I won't go into detail on how you take these tests. However, I did them 2 or 3 times, and I was, I was null and void in that department. And I told her, I don't believe you. So I said, you better come home. Oh, we had those 2 kids, too, and so when she would go down and she got a little job back in Greenfield, and she'd drive back and forth and stay overnight, supposedly with her mother. Apparently she was staying with somebody else overnight, and I didn't know it. So the point is that she finally fessed up to me. She had an appointment for an abortion scheduled. This was Monday. She says, I'm going to have an abortion on Thursday in Springfield, Mass, so that way the people of the small town would know about it. So she says, I said, wait a minute, you telling me this is my child and you've already got abortion scheduled for it? Whatever. You know, I was really, well, that night, I took the babysitter home. I went back to my house where I had this nice little, we all had a bar in those days, whether it was a stand-up bar or whatever, we all had one. And I poured myself a double scotch after I took the kids home. And I didn't sober up for over 10 years. That was the flip. I think I was already almost there, because in my business, I had to entertain a lot. I had to take people to lunch. It was a big deal to them. To me, it was like the 3rd one this week and that kind of shit. So, heavy drinker, nah, but moderate or into heavy, I don't know. But the thing is that I got drunk that night and I never sobered up for 10 years. I went through hell. I really went through hell. My company had promoted me to Albany, New York. I was running a terminal over there and commuting back and forth to Pittsfield. I gave that job up. I resigned from that. It was the best job I ever had. And I think that was due to alcoholism. I think I did it because I was stupid. And I couldn't think straight. And I ended up going through the next 10 years. I finally got a job back with that company, and they sent me out to Kankakee, Illinois, to open up what we call a 100-man barn, a 100-driver terminal. And I was drunk all the time. I was drunk all the time I was out there. I couldn't help myself. It was getting so bad. Yeah, we've all know the stories about getting up in the morning and having that first drink. You always had it over the sink, right? So that when you threw it up, you all could get another slug down. And if that one stayed down, it was time to go to work. And I did a lot of stupid things in dealing with the Teamsters that I never would have done had I not been drunk all the time. Alcohol was I know you're going to find this hard to understand, but I never, ever did drugs. Well, that was ego, because I knew drugs were illegal, but alcohol wasn't. So I could drive drunk, maybe get a slap across the hand, but if I got caught with drugs, I'd lose my job, blah, blah, blah. So I never did that. I did all this damage solely on alcohol. And I can understand where anybody who's doing drugs comes from. I can understand that, because the feelings are the same. They really are. And I know about what I started out this session, or this talk with, was about we're God's people. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. And boy, I'm telling that to every one of us in this room. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. Because when we come in this program, when I came in this program, it was tail between my legs. I got into a place called the Brattleboro Retreat in Brattleboro, Vermont, and I went up. They gave me the big book. I went up and I read the first 164 pages that first night. And then they gave me the 12 and 12 book, and I went up and went through the steps the second night. The third day I came down, I said, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go home. That's how serious I took this. I thought I was having some time off. I was so serious that I had my mother bring my car up to the Brattleboro Retreat on the Thursday before I got let out, or the Tuesday, whatever, it doesn't matter. And when they cashed me out, they gave me $4 that I had left in my little account at the retreat. You know how that goes, right? They give you a little spending money. And back in those days, I got in my car, and I looked at that $4 and said, you know what, I can get a pint with this. And boom, off to the Vermont State Liquor Store I went. And lo and behold, they were having a sale. I could get a whole fifth for $4.95. I go, wow, I just died and went to heaven. But this is my alcoholic's thinking. I said, I'm going to get this fifth, but I'm only going to drink half of it between here and where I'm staying. And guess where I was staying, folks? At 40 years old, at my folks' house. Is that a storybook or what? That's what we did. So, of course, when I got to Greenfield, there was that much left in the bottle, and I was off and running again. Because I didn't have a problem with alcohol. I didn't think so, not then. So, anyway, I took this woman hostage, and she liked to drink a little vodka once in a while, too, so you know how that goes. So, she would go in the pantry, if we were having company, she'd go in the pantry and pour me a drink of vodka with an ice cube in it and leave it in the pantry, and I just walk in there, because most of the people that come and visit would be people who were my family or something, and they knew I shouldn't be drinking. And I went through that hell for 10 years, in and out. I was in 6 28-day programs. I lost count of how many times I checked in to detox. I think 25. So I'm going to say 25 relapses besides those 6. And I had 16 seizures in that 10 years because I knew I had to have help, but I was too stubborn, too prideful to go back in the hospital again and have everybody know I was in there because I got this disease of alcoholism. This isn't astigmatism back in those days. It's astigmatism, and you are an alcoholic. You were like the people walking down the street that you could see through their skin, and see their organs. They drank so much. You ever seen that? Whew. Anyway, so what happened was, and this is why I'm standing here today. The last treatment center I went into was in Keene, New Hampshire, and the next day the shrink asked me, do you remember coming in here last night? And I said, yes, I do. Do you remember talking to the nurses? Yeah, I remember. Are you cracking jokes? Yeah. He said, do you know what your blood alcohol level was? And I said, no, I don't know. He said it was a 0.34. Okay. 6 more, normally, and a person, all of his involuntary functions start shutting down, i.e. your breathing, your heart, That's why people who drink a lot have heart attacks, because they've got so much alcohol in them, the heart starts. I'm not a medical person, but I just know that from being there. And I got on my knees and I asked God to help me. And I meant it this time. This time I really and truly meant it. I threw myself into Alcoholics Anonymous, and immediately when I asked God to help me change my life and my lifestyle, the promises started working for me right away. Now, it doesn't happen a lot, but, when I got out of there, I saw this truck go by that said BDR Transport, Vermont to California. Ha-ha! That's what an alcoholic says. I need to get out to California. This could be a good way to do it. It's all these people around here that are making me drink. And, so that was a Monday. On a Friday, I was hired on the spot. Okay, that's good. But what it did is, see, if you go on the docks in Boston, Massachusetts, and you crate up a jackass, and if you throw it on the back of one of my trucks and take it out to California, when you opened up that crate, you still had a jackass. And that's exactly what happened to me. But this time, I had AA beside me. And when I got to California, I was staying in a hotel on Century Boulevard in L.A. The first thing I did was call up Alcoholics Anonymous. And believe it or not, I was at a meeting in Torrance. And that was an experience in itself, but I was in a meeting in Torrance at an AA meeting. 2 or 3 weeks later, I opened up this terminal in Santa Fe Springs and started getting into AA around the Whittier, Fullerton, Santa Fe Springs area like that. And those people opened their arms up to me. This is what I found. I like to be a loner sometimes, but I can't be. I've got to get a meeting. I've got to go to meetings. And, God took care of me, and He helped me get sober. He got me sober. The people helped me get sober. And as it turns out, I was starting to be able to make better decisions. Sometimes you have to make just on-the-spot decisions, but they were better than when I was drinking for some strange reason. I don't understand it. But I was able to make better decisions. All along in my career out here, and now the reason why you hear so much about this damn trucking business is because that was my identity. That was my whole identity, is being in that business. It was really weird. But eventually God gave me the courage to buy into a partnership in the trucking business. And what we specialize in moving MRI trailers all over the country. And from there, He gave me the courage to start my own business. Folks, you're looking at a guy who was afraid of his shadow. But with the help of Alcoholics Anonymous and the help of everybody in this program, somehow, some way, I would garner the courage to take that step. No risk, no reward. And that's the same way as I feel about Alcoholics Anonymous. You come in here, you say, okay, I'm done. Okay, you may be done drinking, but you got a whole shitload of problems ahead of you. You have no idea what's coming. That's the risk. So you take that risk and you sit down with a sponsor. You share your feelings with another man. You might even have to hug him. That was a big thing for me. But I just, somehow, some way, I got the strength and the courage, and it is all a result of Alcoholics Anonymous and my connection. When I made that connection with my higher power, I knew right away I was going to have to get a sponsor. So I picked this guy who was a janitor at the Catholic Church. You know, and I remember 3 months later, I got promoted to go out to California with this BDR transport. He took me out to lunch or dinner, and he says, "Now I want to tell you something. You got an ego problem." I go, "What? After what I've been through? How can you say that?" "No," he says, "you got an ego problem, and that's something you're going to have to tell your new sponsor when you get out there." "I got an ego problem." I say, "How can you say? I don't understand what you're telling me here." "Well, I do have an ego problem. Sometimes it comes out in front of other people, and sometimes it's inner. And, you know, I remember, I'll tell you one quick story. I had a first thing I did, I got a sponsor, I got on. And the sponsor I chose, we got to be pretty good friends because he was a Teamster cement truck driver, okay? I'm on the other side of the fence. So we became friends because we could talk trucks all the time, you know? And finally I asked him, I said, "Well, you know," no, he told me, he said, "I'm going to be your sponsor from now on." "Oh, okay." I didn't like that idea, you know? I mean, geez, a Teamster for a sponsor. But I did. And he told me one day, "You're going to start getting into service work, my boy." And I said, "Oh, really? Yeah?" "Yeah. There was this woman back in Whittier. She drove this Mustang. And it didn't have any power steering or power brakes, and she didn't like making left-hand turns after dark." So he says to me, "You're going to go pick up Mustang Mary, and you're going to take her to the Sunday night meeting." And I go, "For how long?" He says, "I don't know, 6 months." 10 years later, I was still taking Mary to the Sunday night meetings. And it didn't matter if I was at a family outing or whatever. Everybody knew I was leaving at 6:30 from wherever I was to go pick up Mustang Mary. God, I used to take her to, I can remember bringing her to Laughlin one time. And no, we didn't stay in the same room, but she'd run around and tell everybody, "Hey, here's my boy toy." But such a friendship with that woman, and that's the blessing of Alcoholics Anonymous to me. You know, Mary and I were from different worlds, but she's probably one of the main reasons that I was able to. I would stay sober every week just so I could take Mustang Mary to the Sunday night meeting. Isn't that strange? I am strange, I know that. I gotta go look at my clock here and see where I am. The hell with it. I can see that one. Okay, so the point is, then Pollock Bill, that was my sponsor's name, he says to me, "You got to start," and that's when he told me, "You got to start doing service work. You got to pass this along." And that's where the Mustang Mary story came from. He says, "I want you to buy cookies for the men's group." I says, "Fuck you, nobody tells me what to do. Don't you know I'm the boss of all those people that would work for me?" And he says, "You're going to get the cookies." And I said, "Okay." So now if you go to Chino Valley, we always got cookies because I can't shake that habit, you know. I just, I'm going to wrap this up here. I want to say how important Alcoholics Anonymous is to me. But I also want to say, I feel how important it is to you. You know, it's kind of funny when John walked up and asked me to be the speaker about 10 or 20 minutes before the meeting. And I took a shock because I'm used to having notes. And just as I was walking up there, I remembered the notes were in the car. So that's why I was rambling. I like to be on the point. But the point is, you young people in this program, you know, and it doesn't matter if you've got 5 days, 5 years, 5 months, 5 anything, or 3, I don't know. It's so important that you don't give up. Remember I said a long time ago, persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And you have to be on your toes Not so much about the anonymity. I never really cared if anybody knew I was, after I got sober, of course, if I was in AA. I didn't care about that. But what I cared about was, you know, when I owned my own trucking company and I had to do a lot of flying and a lot of traveling, the first thing on my mind when I got on that plane was, I got to find a meeting. And it got so, in the major cities that we were servicing, I knew how to get to a meeting. And that was, to me, foremost. Because you can be in a room of 200 people, and as an alcoholic, as a recovering alcoholic such as I am, you can be the loneliest person in that room if you don't get out and go to meetings, socialize. See, because as God's people, we don't crawl before anyone. And that's all I have to share without my notes. Thank you very much.
All right. Let's thank the speaker once again.